so welcome back to part two, I believe part two of week 8 code in mobile web applications, where we're covering React. And we just covered the first PowerPoint here in this section, which is what is React. And then I did a little bit of work that I would like you guys to get some practice with. So we're going to go through it in a PowerPoint, and I'll show you what I did. But I want you guys to try doing this with your PWAs. Once you make a React app and combine it with your PWA, you'll need to know how to do this. So once we go through this, we'll actually just see if we can get anyone to do it on their own app. But let's take a look at this PowerPoint, which is converting a React app, an existing React app, to a PWA. So that example that I just gave you, okay, this is what I want you to try this on. You can do this after class on your own time. You can do this now along with it as we go. But we've got this React app here, okay, that I've put on the web. And you can see this is hosted on a secure server, HTTPS. I'm going to close the pure JavaScript one. I'm going to close Netflix as well. So here we've got our app. And if I run my developer console on this, and I've just got it in a separate window here, and I run the Lighthouse report, we're going to see it obviously doesn't pass the test for a PWA, right? It's not a progressive web app. It's not installable. It's not working offline. There's actually some console errors happening, but let's look at this. It's missing a web service and an app manifest. It doesn't register as service worker. It has a couple of splash screens, icons, theme colors, and it also doesn't have a maskable icon. So obviously we'd need to fix these things if we wanted to make a PWA, which is what we've been talking about as a new technology in the first half of the course. So how do we do that? Well, we go through these one at a time, we check them off, and we fix them, and then we move on to the next one until all of these are green and it says it's a progressive web app. So I've actually got a version of mine that I fixed here and made a progressive web app. So you can click this and load it, and you'll see here in the top right, we've got this installable icon here, and it actually prompts you to install it. It didn't load this time, but there was a blue message notification that said to come back here quickly, install this Create React app, which is the template used to make this. So I can click this button and install it. Done. It's installed on my machine, and look at this. It works like a charm. It's like an offline app, and we can resize it, etc. And it's great, right? So that's what we want. We want to be able to have PWAs that are also made out of React to kind of combine the best of both technologies. I'll uninstall it here and remove it, and we're going to learn how to do that with this PowerPoint. So the very first step we can see was in Lighthouse, the manifest didn't have a maskable icon. So we want to make a maskable icon. You can choose whatever image you want, but I went to this website called maskable.app/editor, and I just uploaded an image from one of our previous in-class labs, which was the Hello World. And I uploaded that, and then I just chose the max size for export and downloaded it into let's look at the file structure. I want to make sure I get this right. I downloaded it into, I believe, the public folder, and I named it maskable.png, and here we can see it, okay? So you put it in the same folder as your index.html. Now there's two folders when we talk about React. There's public and then there's source. Public is where your index.html and your manifest.json lives. Source is where your service worker, your index.js, all your JavaScript React components live. So it's a little bit different than how we set up PWAs in the past, but you'll see how we can get them to work like how we used to in the past, and you'll kind of see the similarities. Okay, so we download and rename it in our public folder. Now we need to update the manifest.json file in that folder and add this maskable.png. So I just went to the icons section and I added src maskable size 196 by 196. The type was image/png, and the purpose was any maskable. So that's what makes it a maskable icon. We can just check this in here. I go into the public folder and I open up my manifest.json, and this is the code that you have to add right here. Okay, and whatever you name this, make sure you name it this, so it's the same. Cool. So let's go back to our lighthouse and run it and look at it. We fixed it and our error is gone. We now have a maskable icon. Great. So the next fix, the next bug that's causing us not to have a progressive web app are kind of two related things. We don't have a service worker, which is a big deal. You need a service worker for notifications, for offline features, for caching, all of that good stuff, and to make it installable. So we need to register a service worker. So there's a bit of a workaround for this if you have an existing React app. Typically, what we're going to do in the future is we're going to have nothing. We're going to have either a PWA where we use some of that code or that design, or we're going to have a brand new app and we use this PWA template starter app made by Facebook to make our React app and build our components from within there. But if we want to take the code that you downloaded today and make it into a PWA, I think it's a good practice to kind of get comfortable with messing around in the React environment and registering service workers and creating a React app from that template. So what we're going to do, it's a bit of a workaround, but we're going to install or initialize a new React app in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so we have this to-do app that you downloaded from Blackboard, and then we're going to initialize a brand new React app in Visual Studio Code. So what I did was I opened a new folder, and then the folder that I opened is a folder that I just right-clicked and created in my File Explorer. So in File Explorer, I came up here, and I literally just right-clicked, and you could name this whatever you want. Okay, and then what we do, okay, in Visual Studio Code is go File, Open Folder, and we open the folder we just created. So in that folder, we click whatever you want. Okay, that's the folder I just created, and I hit Select Folder. It's an empty project. There's nothing in here, but we're going to actually initialize a brand new React app. So how do we do that? Well, once we've selected that folder and we create an empty project, we're going to open up a terminal window inside of Visual Studio Code. So to open up a terminal window, we come up to the top here where it says Terminal, and we go New Terminal. And it will open up this window on the bottom, like a little output channel. We can see that it says we're in the path of week 8 or whatever you want. Okay, it's an empty project. There's no files on the side here. And what we want to do is type the following code. We want to type npx, which is Node Package Manager, which is going to create a React app. That's the code for it, create React app. This is whatever you want the app to be called, my test app. Then you do -- template, because we're going to use a template to create this. Whoops, skip the slide. We're going to use a template, and the template we're going to use is the CRA, otherwise known as Create React App, template PWA. And now you recognize PWA as Progressive Web App and CRA as Create React App. So this is a template that Facebook made, and we can look at this online up here. If we type in Create React App PWA template, we can see, I believe, does it show that it's made by Facebook? Well, the Create React App library is made by Facebook. We can see this here. On github.com, Facebook, as the developer right here, they made something called Create React App. And what Create React App is it builds a React app template with no build configuration. And all you have to do is run this code, npx create react app, and then give it a name. Now, if you want to use a template, there's a template that they made called CRA template PWA, which makes a template for a progressive web app. If you like TypeScript, you can add the TypeScript identifier to the end of that. All right, and then we want to register our service worker. So we type this code in here, npx create react app underscore whatever you want to call your app template, and it'll make all those packages. So let's go here and we'll type this out. npx create -react app, and then you call it whatever you want. App name ben -- template CRA template PWA. Hit enter, and we'll see it downloading and installing some Node Package Manager files. Oh, we can't name it with capital letters. I forgot that. There we go. So obviously proper naming conventions, lowercase, and it's creating a new React app in this folder. It's installing React, React Document Object Model, and React scripts with the CRA template of Progressive Web App. Now what this has just done, okay, if we look up here, we can see a new folder called app name Ben. That is what we called our app. If I expand this, we're going to see a very similar project structure. Now, obviously, it's still downloading. You can see this. We're going to see a similar project structure to what you downloaded from Blackboard, which is all the node modules, our package.json, our src folder, and our public folder. Inside of those is going to be the default template files for a Create React App template with a progressive web app enhancements, which means it has a manifest.json and a service worker. And basically what we're going to do once we get those files installed is we're going to copy our service worker and our service worker register, okay, from this project and move it into our existing project that we downloaded from our Blackboard file. Okay, so it's going to be in your src folder once everything's downloaded, and it's going to be these two files called service worker.js and service worker registration. So let's come back to our Visual Studio Code. Let this download. I'll just pause the recording while this downloads, and we will continue the recording. There we go.
But sir, why can't we?
Zoom. Okay, so the files have finished downloading, and I know they've finished downloading because I can see here it says done, 21 seconds. All of these things, this took 30 seconds to install those dependencies. And if you have any warnings about, an old version, it'll tell you the code to type. Here I'm getting some suggestions to build, or to run some tests with Yarn. I'm not going to do those, but they might give you some updates code to update your node package manager. So you'll know it worked when you have a public folder and a source folder with the following files. So in here, I've got my index.html. Now remember, this is just a template, and everything in here is just kind of given to us with us not having to really do any coding, which is kind of sweet. But the reason I think this exercise is really helpful at the beginning of learning React is because it takes our knowledge of PWAs and how service workers work with the manifest.json, and it allows us to implement it into React app. So then we understand where we can find the elements of a PWA inside of a React app. In the future, we'll just create this template that comes with the PWA stuff installed, but I think it's really good practice to learn how to make a React app into a PWA React app in order to learn a bit about the environment. So in here, we've got our index.html, some logos, and our manifest.json. We don't need to worry about any of that stuff. What we want to look for is this file and this file. So we can see it here. I've got it highlighted. It's called service-worker.js and service-worker-registration.js. Now inside of this, there's a bunch of code that's testing to see if the production environment is a production, if the service worker is in the navigator, if the public URL matches service-worker.js. In service-worker.js, we can see they're looking for a bunch of different routes and things to make sure that it's bound to the index.html start page. We don't have to change any of this code. We just take these two files, Control-C, and then we go back, to our actual project, which is in here, and we go into the src folder, and we're just going to paste them, just like this. Just paste them right in there. Okay, and then once they're pasted, let's see how they're getting used. So let's look at index.js, and let's look at the lines of code in here that actually reference those files. So we can see this line on line 5 where we've referenced.
I downloaded it, but I didn't get the service worker things in the source file.
Yeah, so you're just going to copy service-worker.js from our template project and service-worker-registration.js from our template project, and you're going to paste them into the project I gave you off of Blackboard in the src folder right here, like this. We don't have to change anything. We're going to keep them the exact same. Now, the next thing we want to do, so we pasted them into our src directory into our existing app. Okay, so this PowerPoint is actually really helpful because it gives you every single step. So we've pasted those files, and now we want to look at how they're being used in our index.js from the template app. So we can see on line 5, we've imported the service worker registration from that service worker registration file. And then we want to copy that line of code and paste it into our existing, the code I gave you from Blackboard, index.js. So let's look at our existing code in here. If I double click this, okay, we can see I already have this. I already added it, but you won't have this line. Okay, it'll look like that. So we want to import our service worker registration. If we don't have it imported, then it won't actually call the code from that file. So we can see it here in index.js. If I go in here, we've imported service worker registration. And then the only other line of code that we really want from this file is service worker registration dot unregister. But if you want your app to work offline, you'll read it in the comments here, and load faster, you can change unregister to register below. Note this comes with some pitfalls, and you can learn more about service workers here. So they give you a link to read more about it. Now, I'm not sure what pitfalls they're talking about, other than maybe it uses room on the cache or other stuff in memory, and then it's a little bit more processor heavy. I don't know what they're talking about with pitfalls, but we do want to register. So we're going to copy this line of code from line 18, service worker registration dot unregister, and we're going to paste it into here, but we're going to change it to register. Okay. Now you'll see I have a console.log with a test in it. You don't have to type that, but just make sure you paste that line of code in there as well. And we can see that's on the next slide here as well. So just 2 lines of codes that we want to copy from the index.js template to the index.js in our Blackboard code. Okay. So you think that would be it, but I was stuck on this for like 4 hours doing this because there's some very slight differences in the code in order to get it working on your machine. So there's still errors present. If we run this code and we do the npm start whatever and run it on our server, it's still going to say there's no service worker. It's still going to say it doesn't register a start URL. And that's because right here, line 22 of service worker registration.js that we copied, it's checking in this if statement in that register function. Okay, so when we call .register, it's now checking if the production environment is equal to production. And in which case we're running it on localhost, and so it's not. So that will never trigger and it will never register our service worker. So we need to change a couple things so that that does happen, right? And I'll show you what those kind of quirky changes we have to do are. So let me just get the code open here.
I have a question.
Yes. You have a question? Yes, what's up?
Yeah. Are we expected to follow along the lecture?
If you can, then that's great. If you can't, then the recording will be posted, and the PowerPoints are really great help for getting this working on your own. Thank you. So if you want to follow along and you're able to keep up, then that's perfect. But I think the video will be really helpful too, because I'm going to post this recording to YouTube, and then you'll be able to pause it, replay back if you have a bug in your code or something like that. So there'll be both options. And if you want to just follow the PowerPoint slides, then you can just follow the PowerPoint slides as well. So there's 3 options sort of for how you want to do it.
Thank you very much.
Cool. So we still have some errors, and it's seeing if it's in production environment. So let me see. The first thing I did was I took that piece of code out. Now, if you're going to run it on a production server, like I did, then you leave this piece of code in. But if you're just running it on your local host, then you can take that out. Process.env node_environment == production. So now my if statement is just if service worker in navigator, okay, on line 23. So you change that code to equal that. Now, if you're uploading it to a server again, I'll repeat this, you can leave the if statement alone. If you have a server that you want to upload your code to in FTP or whatever, and you want to put the React app online. But if you just want to run it in localhost with npm start, then you want to take this out because you're not in a production environment. Excuse me, I have to sneeze. Okay, so with that out of the way, the next step that we have to do is go to our index.html and add a base href in our index.html. And this tag will be placed in the head tag before any other element that uses a URL. Okay, this is the best place is to put it right up here under our char set. Okay, so the reason we have to do this is because %public _ URL % is always going to be empty for a local development server. The base href will be resulted in a slash. Okay, in the case of a production build, it'll change to the subdirectory that you're uploading it to. Okay, so if you're uploading it to a production environment with a subdirectory, or if you're uploading it to localhost, you need % caps lock public _ URL %, and then there's a slash, and then double quote. Okay, this solves the problem with asset loading. Okay, so again, I'll show you this in my code. We will go to the public folder. In the public folder, index.html, and in index.html on my line 5, I have %. Okay, and then after the %, I have public _ URL %/. Okay, don't forget that slash there. I'm just putting spaces in between to make it more legible, but I'm going to get rid of them right here. Okay, and I'm not going to save those changes. So that's the first thing you need, is that line of code right there. The next thing we need is something called a start URL. Now you'll notice your start URL might be different. If you're running it on a subdomain, like I am here, _PWA, here's my subdomain. Okay, it's venergon.ca / and then it's in a folder. So if you're running it on a server in a subdomain, you need to include the subdomain in the start URL right here. So I have / to do react _PWA / index.html. Now, if you're just on localhost, you just need / index.html. Okay, so two things there. Just need / index.html. You don't need a subdirectory if you're not running on a subdirectory. The next thing we need to do is go to our package.json and change it to whatever our URL is. So if you have a subdirectory like I do, you put your subdirectory in there. So you come into your public folder again, you go up one directory, and then we have a file called package.json here. That's an automatic build package that Node makes, or that the React template comes with. And you can see here, my home page is set to / then my subdomain, then /. Now, if you don't have a subdomain and you're just running it on localhost, okay, then all you have to do is leave it as, oh, that's not a good example there, I guess. Page, package.json. They don't have it, doesn't exist, so you won't have it. You'll just go like this. Homepage, double quotes, homepage, colon, double quotes. And I believe you just put a / in there. Make sure you put a comma. You might have to play around with this. It might be /, I think it actually will be for you. it'll be slash index.html. Okay, and that's what you'll do, unless it's on a subdirectory. So this setting is what's later going to be used as the %public URL %environment variable in that base href tag, as well as in the router that we did right here. Whatever you put in there is going to go in front in that public URL. So here we have slash public URL slash manifest.json. So for you guys, if you're just running on localhost, I believe you just want to do slash. That's it. Or you might actually just want to leave it empty. You have to experiment with the two things because I'm not entirely sure for localhost. I know for subdomain you have to put your subdomain folder in here, but I think if you're on localhost, you just leave your slash if you're in the root environment folder. Yes?
Could you please tell me why the base tag is necessary in index.html and why we are feeding the public URL to that?
So the base tag here is basically used for, let me see here. In service worker registration, we can see we reference something called process.env.public URL / service worker. So if you want to actually load this / service worker.js file, whatever your public URL is going to be the base reference plus that extension to get to that file location. So for you guys on localhost, you might not actually have to have anything in there, but I'm just showing you if you're running it on a server, okay, and the server has a subdomain, right? So you're like at yourdomain.com / whatever / this app / my app, whatever you're calling it. You have to have that subdomain prefix before the JS file is loaded, or else it won't be able to find it. So we have to have this base URL in front of. If you're running it on the root folder, so it's just whatever.com, and that's your app right there, like netflix.com, and it shows up, then you don't need the public URL. This is only if you have a subdomain for your app. So say you want 2 apps or 3 apps, and I'm assuming you do. In this course, we're going to build different apps, right? If you want to make more than one React app and you have a website and you want to have app 1 and you're sudarsan.com, you do sudarsan.com / app 1. And then you can also have sudarsan.com / app 2, and both apps run on their own subdomains. Now, if you just want it to be whatever app on your homepage, sudarsan.com, then you don't have to worry about a base URL because everything's in the root folder. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Cool. So yeah, don't worry about the homepage or the base URL if you're just running in your root folder. So if you're just on your local host, then you just a couple of these steps you can ignore, but you will have to take out this production. Where was it? This production line in service worker registration.js on line 22. Because you're not in a production environment. Okay, next thing. So that we did the home page. Yep. Now we want to adjust the router in app.js. So this one is still a little bit confusing, but since every React router uses the history package, we need to import it and make some adjustments. First of all, we have to install the history package if you don't have it. So you can ignore this step for now and try it and see if your code runs by running npm start. And if it doesn't work, this fixed it for me. You run npm install -- save history. So this line of code here. All right, and what that does is it adds the history package, and this will prepend necessary paths and make the router work in each environment, local and production. Okay, so this solution offers a way to deploy your site into a subfolder at any level by using native HTML capabilities without adding an environment config variable everywhere. So it worked for me. If it doesn't work for you, then leave an email to see if we can figure it out. But what you have to do to prepend the necessary paths with the history package from Node Package Manager is first install it. Once it's installed, add these 2 lines of code in the app.js file inside of your source folder in the React code for the app from Blackboard. On line 3, I have import create browser history from history. So that's importing that node package into this file. And then I'm exporting a constant called history. And then the constant that I'm exporting is base name process.environment variable public URL. And that way, because it's checking my URL to see if I'm in production or to see if I'm on a subfolder, it makes it work at all levels. Okay, so if that doesn't work for you, then we have to try something else. Once you run that, you can run npm run build. Okay, if you want to upload the files to a server. If you don't want to upload the files to a server, just run npm start. Now, npm run build will create a build folder in the same folder of our node modules, and that build folder is what we can use to transfer the files via FTP to our server at our subdomain. So my server is veneragon.ca, and I take all of the files inside of the build folder. You can see I'm inside my React app/build, and I upload them, drag and drop into my subdomain to do _react_pwa. And then we can see here on the next page, it worked. I'm on my subdomain to do react_pwa, and I get the prompt to install my create React app. And then when I did an F12 and I did a lighthouse, we can see I got the check mark. It's a progressive web app. For some reason, it still had this error saying it didn't have a service worker, but up here it says that I did have a service worker and they do meet the installability requirements. So there might just be some editing I have to do with my start URL address. Maybe I have to add a slash in front or a dot in front. It can be pretty picky with that kind of stuff, but I'll end this recording here so that it's a shorter recording, and then we'll get into seeing if that actually worked for you guys and if you have any questions. So I'll stop that.